had a lot of interest in doing some kind of Photoshop tutorial, so I decided to start with one that's simple and impactful. It's called the Clone Stamp tool. Now, I don't use this often, but every once in a while it's really, really helpful. And this dance portrait and dance shoot that I did a few weeks ago is the perfect example. As you can see, it's a very clean, simple environment. The background's just light gray, the floors are gray, and it'll be easier to show you how to use the Clone Stamp tool on. The busier the background, the harder it is to use, so I'm going to show you another example of a photo as well. This one I've already used the Clone Stamp tool on, and I'm going to show you the original. So you can see a little scuff on the floor here. You can see the tape line where the floor's taped and it's kind of worn. And you can also see an outlet in the background. Now, I had limited options in this shoot for backgrounds, and we wanted a clean background, and so there was this one small-ish wall, and I wanted the girls to stay there so that we would have that clean background, but there is this outlet and the tape line, so a couple of distractions. Now, this is a beautiful photo on its own, but once I was able to get rid of those distractions, it's just more beautiful. And this is one they actually used on the front of their program for their recital last week. So I'm going to do a different photo that I loved from this shoot. I wanted her to show movement in her photos, and so I had her doing some turns. But because the wall is not huge, there wasn't a lot of space for her to move and get that movement. And in this particular photo, as you can see, the wall's cut off there, and there is a bathroom door behind it. And I don't really want that bathroom door to show, so I'm going to show you a trick to get rid of that as well, which is very easy just because this is such a simple background. So we're also going to use the brush tool. We're going to be using two different tools in this tutorial. The second picture we're going to do is one that I love of my sister and brother-in-law. Sister-in-law and brother-in-law. I don't have any sisters. And they're just walking. It's very natural. They didn't even know I was taking this picture. But it's got some distractions. You see the stop sign and post here, and I don't want that in the picture, so we're going to work on getting that out and see if we can get the Clone Stamp tool to work on a busier background, one that's going to take maybe a little bit more time. So the first thing I'm going to do is open these up in Photoshop, and I already have them open. And then I am going to make sure that I have my zoom tool open. I click on that, and I want to zoom in because when you use the Clone Stamp tool, you want to be able to see all the details. If I get in really close, you can see these tape lines, you can see the scuff marks. The next thing I need to do is click on the Clone Stamp tool. It looks like a stamp. So click on that, and up here at the top you want to have a feather in your Clone Stamp, otherwise it's not going to look natural. So find a soft round brush, and right now my size is at 250 pixels, and you can actually use the bracket on your keyboard. Oops, that didn't work. Just ignore that. It's not working because I have clicked on this, but you can actually slide up and down here to change the size of the brush. See how it's smaller now? You want no hardness on your brush. You want it to look really natural. So as long as you have a soft brush here, you actually don't have to mess with that at all, and you can use the brackets on your keyboard to move it up and down. That's a really cool trick. That's really helpful. Like say I want to cover this whole scuff mark, so I want it bigger, but then I want it smaller as I'm working on this. So it makes it a lot easier if you can use those brackets. So what the clone stamp tool actually does is it just takes a part of your picture and copies it. So what I'm going to do is on my Mac, I push Option and I use the left clicker and what it does is it copies that area. So when I hover over the scuff mark, we are actually seeing is this portion of the picture. And so I hold down with my mouse, but as you can see here, the scuff mark showed up again because I only took this part. The scuff mark was there as well. So you have to be really careful what part of the picture that you take. So I'm going to Command Z, which just undoes, that's not a word, but it's an undo button because I didn't like the way that that worked. So I'm actually going to make this a little bit smaller. I'm going to take a spot over here, and you can see a plus sign underneath, and that shows the part of the picture that I am copying. So that way I can see if it's going over a part that I don't want. Okay, so I decided I don't want that scuff mark there. Now, like I said before, this is really simple because everything's just gray. So I'm just gonna Option and click with my mouse, and you can see that plus mark, the part that I'm taking. But look, it started taking the tape mark over there. Isn't that interesting? So I just want you to kind of see how it works. Now I'm moving the tape mark over, and that's not what I want to do. So I'm going to Command Z, and I'm going to go over a little bit farther even. And for this one, it's really easy to just go straight up, but you could say, oh, for this part, I want this part of the floor. Now here, I made another scuff mark, so I'm going to take another piece and cover that scuff mark up. Maybe I don't want this scuff mark to show, so I'm going to Option click. Something else showed up that I don't like. It's very simple, okay? I got too close to the tape mark again. As I go up and as I get closer, so see there, as I get closer to her dress, now I copied some scuff marks again and I don't want to see those, so I'm going to go back and do that. The other thing you need to look at is shadow. So there's shadow here, and I might want some of that, more of that shadow to show here. So I'm going to pull some more of shadow in. Or maybe that's too much shadow, so I'm going to add a little bit more of the lighter color. Okay, so up here I'm going to zoom in even more because I want this to look as natural as possible. I'm going to take my clone stamp, too close again to the tape line, and I'm going to make it smaller so I can use a lot more detail here around the line of her dress. You see the color's a little bit different here too, oops, because there's some shadow. It's a lot harder to do when you're talking. Okay, so I'm going to cover that up a little bit more. Now here is a really good example of using a line. So maybe I want that line to show a little bit more. My clone stamp. Maybe I'm going to make it a little smaller. want to cover up that tiny bit of tape line there. But I want it to match everything. See how I did that? This is a really cool tool. I could just sit here and do this all day. Okay, so that's not perfect, but just for this, I'm going to show you the difference. I love that I can see a little bit of the reflection of the dance shoes in that picture. Okay, so you see how much better that looks already. Now I'm going to zoom in again so that we can work on this light switch. Clone stamp tool. Facebook. And that's easy because it's white and it just covered right up. Okay, and then down here, that's where it gets a little bit trickier. I'm going to make it nice and big, not too big, or else you can see that it's showing that. And I want to actually extend my clone stamp. I want to extend this baseboard and make it look like the wall is going all the way across. So up here you see my flow is at 68, it's not at 100, and that's why it doesn't completely cover it. And that makes it look more natural. So that's why I had to go back and forth a few times to make it look the way I wanted it to, and make it look like it's not see-through. You don't want it to look see-through. So I picked another spot and I'm just extending the baseboard. Isn't that cool? And I'm going to come down here and I want to cover up that caution tape. So I'm going to extend across and down a little bit, cover up that little bit of tape. And then I'm going to do the same a little bit higher. A little bit. There we go. As you can see, it only extends the side of the wall. So then I'm going to over again. And I could do that all the way up. So I'm extending the wall out. But another trick, here's my last trick that I was talking about with the brush. I just extend the wall a little bit at a time and I could keep going. But another thing that you can do is take your brush tool and use Option and click, and that takes the color. And I'm just gonna brush the color over. So this isn't taking part of the picture like the clone stamp tool does. Zoom it out a little bit. It actually brushes the color on. And this works just because it's a white background and the lighting's pretty even. Now up here I've got my flow down to 21. So I'm going to move that up a little bit, and maybe I'll move my opacity up a little bit, and then I don't have to brush over and over as much. Let's see if I can finish this really quick. It's not perfect, but you get the idea. So down here, I don't like the way that shadow looks. So I could take my clone stamp tool again, or I could take my brush, and I probably want the opacity down because I want to be able to see some texture. Take that opacity way down, and I'll just brush the lighter color over that so that it all matches a little bit better. Or I could be clone stamping, you can do either. Clone stamp probably would look a little more natural, just a little bit faster. And it depends on how clean of a look you want. If you want it to look really clean, like for an advertisement, then you might want to use the brush tool more. I'm going to show you one more really quick trick with that brush tool. See how she's got a little bit of shine here on her face? You can see it looks pixelated because I have it zoomed in so much, but I want it zoomed in a lot. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm using my bracket keys to move the brush down again. I'm going to option, and like this is the color of her face, right? So I'm going to take my brush tool and I'm pretty much just coloring over the shine on her face there. I was making her work really hard, so she was sweating a lot. This isn't something I do all the time. This is something that I would charge extra for if a client asked for it. But to be able to know how to do it, it's really important as a photographer, especially if you have a client that wants you to do something like that. So just getting rid of a little bit more of that shine on her nose. Now see, I have the opacity down really, really low so it looks natural. Let the shine down a little bit. And look how beautiful that is. So you can see right here, that's not perfectly blended. And that's something else where I would go through like, oh, that's a little bit not quite dark enough there, and kind of play around with it. So I'm going to save that and go back over to Lightroom and show you the difference between no clone stamp and clone stamp. This is something I would deliver to a client. This I would not deliver to a client. I could crop this off, but it wouldn't look as aesthetically pleasing. So it's nice to be able to have that option to cover that up. So it's not perfect. It could be better, but that's a really good demonstration. Okay, on to the second picture. None of my keys are working, so I'll do that manually. And I'm just going to do this one really fast. Zoom way in. Take my clone stamp tool. I don't want it too big. I don't want to cover too much of an area because I want it to look natural. So I'm option, click, cover that area. Option, click. This one you have to be more careful. See how that's starting to show up? I don't want that to happen. So even down here I can see it doing it a little bit. Make the road look a little bit smaller even. Option, click. Keep it really natural looking. Oh, and see how I got too close. So it's actually, I'm gonna pull over a little bit more. And I'm also making it pretty big, and you could make it the brush smaller and have a better chance of not doing what I just did. I'm going back up. Now, this should be a lot harder, but it isn't. But it is important that you make it match up. Like you want this mountain line to match here, and you want this to match here, because you could clone stamp and do this, and then it doesn't match, and it doesn't look as natural. So you want to make sure like my road line matches up here. Down here I might even move it over. See how I could make it not match and that wouldn't look good. So just make sure it matches up. Finish the rest of this. Go over more. And it's actually a pretty quick edit. There's a little bit more forgiveness here because it's got more texture in the background. So I'm going to save that. And I'm going to go back to my Lightroom. I'm already in Photoshop. And I'm going to show you the before and after. And taking that distraction out is huge. That's something that I would be more willing to deliver to a client. Now there's this one over here that I could also take out, or I could crop out. So that is my clone stamp and brush tool tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions.